Welcome back to NFL Survivor Week number 2, 2023. We're picking winners with the Cheezeman. How'd you do last week? How did you do? You did pretty well. You did pretty well. Take a look here. You know my big pool, I told you I'm running with 6 entries this year. You can see there we won 5 out of 6. Week 1, we have a rebuy option if you lose. And so guess who? Those Minnesota Vikings, I told you here last week, the 2 teams that have busted my chops the most in all my Survivor years, Minnesota and the Chargers. And of course, Minnesota gets me in week 1. They got a lot of people. Hey, look at our top 5 plays last week. Not too bad, huh? Not too bad. We gave you the Green Bay Chicago over. That was an easy winner. I told you Chicago had one of the 5 worst defenses in the league a year ago. I just felt like those teams would both be able to score points. Baltimore -10. You know, you're playing a new coach, new rookie quarterback. That seemed pretty easy to get out of the gate. Cleveland, we gave you. I still don't understand how Cincinnati was a favorite that game, honestly. Burrow had a rough first game last year when I think he had his appendix out and didn't play much of preseason. And now this year, he hasn't played much of preseason. It's going to take him a couple games to get going, so that was an easy win for us. Jacksonville team total over 24.5 points hit. As I said, their offense has been clicking the last 6 games or so of last year, and now the first game this year. That offense is pretty strong. One of the best in the league, I think. The one I lost, Jordan Love, over 13.5 yards or 13 yards rushing. He ended up with, I think, 12, so he just missed. 4-1 I'll take. Now, down below in the bonus section, you can see I had suggested taking each rookie quarterback to throw an interception and hit their rushing totals over. I'll show you what that looked like in a second here. And then I told you I like those dogs. The dogs went 3-2. Boy, New England was close to making it 4-1, but oh well. And then I did say last week, Kansas City Detroit over. Now, that was when I thought Travis Kelce was playing. Unfortunately, I did these videos earlier in the week. Once I found out Kelce was out, I went and took the Detroit Lions money line and won some money there, which was nice. Speaking of those rookie quarterbacks, here's what would have happened, and I just made it easy. Let's say you threw 100 on each play. C.J. Stroud did not throw an interception. He was the only one who didn't. He did rush for over 13.5 yards. Bryce Young, you can see his rushing total was over. He did throw a pick. You would have won both of those. Anthony Richardson did throw a pick, but his rushing total, he had 40 yards. His total was 46.5. You can see at the bottom, if you would have bet 100 on each, you would have bet 600. You'd have returned over 700. So at least you would have won some money with it, right? All right, let's get into Survivor. Here's the big pool I'm in. What happened last week, week 1? 1,489 entries, 493 eliminated. It's over 30%. Wow, another big year of losing entries in week 1, but nowhere near the bloodbath we had last year. We lost over 900 entries week 1, so that's kind of a relief, right? Remember I mentioned last week, don't think about optimal strategies and all this stuff early on. The first 3-4 weeks of the season, put your head down, get through, advance, just get through. After about week 4, you can start to think of strategies if you want to look aheads. I never do. I find they always tend to screw you up. But, you know, right now, you just want to get through. You can see the top win choices: Washington, Baltimore, Jacksonville, Atlanta, etc. Top loss choices: Minnesota and Seattle just lamb-blasted people over 300 out. Chicago, 56 out. I was shocked to see that many people pick the Bears. 34 still on Kansas City despite Kelce not playing. I think that was a little risky, and you certainly could have got Kansas City in a better spot later this year. So I thought that was risky, but okay. Fair enough. Key metrics that we tend to take a look at. Remember last week we told you week 1, the last couple of years has been dogs and unders. And unders, a lot unders. Take a look what happened this year. Home teams, 6-10. Favorites, 8-8. Home teams normally win 56% of the time. They only get 37.5% this year. Favorites typically win 2/3 of the time. They only hit 50%. Home favorites were a disaster at 4-6. Away favorites actually still did okay at 4-2. They pretty much hit where they normally hit. Thursday night favorites, as I said, 2 years ago, they set a record. They won like 83% of games. Last year, still over 70%. This year, we get off to an 0-1 start with Kansas City. And top 5 Survivor pool choices. Last year, it finished at 73% total. This year, we start off 3-2, which is not as bad as what we did last year. But that number should be up towards 80% as we get going. Other metrics, home favorites, just bombs. Away favorites were the only things that did very well. The over-under, take a look again, 4-12. Last year, they were 5-11 week 1. This year, 4-12. And I'm going to tell you right now, we did analysis, and we're going to show you probably week 3 or 4 this over-under information, but the offenses don't catch up to about week 3 or 4. The scoring does not, it ramps up in weeks 1 and 2 until it finally gets to normal in weeks 3 or 4. So be aware of that. 6-point favorites straight up went 2-0, so that's good. We had no major upsets. Last year through week 2, our 6-point favorites straight up were 6-6. That's how insane it was. 6-6, just awful. Something else we'll keep tabs on: your home away favorites straight up and against the spread, based on the point spreads, okay? So you can see here, home favorites straight up bombed. The only ones that did any good were the 6 to 9.5 point favorites went 2-0. On the away favorites, the 3.5 to 5.5 point favorites went 2-0. Then against the spread, same scenarios. Those same groups did the best, all right? All right, here's our schedule for week 2. A couple of quick notes. Our leading favorites are Dallas and Buffalo, giving 9.5 points each. San Francisco's giving 8 to the Rams. Thursday night, Philly's giving 6.5 out of the gate. 9 home dogs this week. 9. That is a lot of home dogs. So with that kind of number, you could expect some crazy things to go on. Last year in week 2, we had a situation where 25% more of the pool was eliminated. We have rebuys and those kinds of things, but I do expect another bizarre week where we could see a large group get knocked out. Again, be careful. Don't be one of them. All right, some things we talked about last week. Super Bowl winners week 1. Normally they go 13-4 straight up, 9-8 against the spread. And we told you Kansas City at the time was a 6.5 point favorite over Detroit. Favorites of 6 and more points were 1-4 against the spread. So I said I'd probably take KC straight up, take Detroit in the points. I did take Detroit in the points. The number went down to 4.5 once we found out Kelsey wasn't playing. So it really wasn't a fair kind of game for the numbers. But, oh well, it is what it is. And Kansas City got beat straight up. Philly, Super Bowl losers, tend to not do as well. 5-12 against the spread. And you can see Super Bowl losers at 3.5 point favorites or more were 3-8 against the spread. But Philly jumped. They did what they did last year. Create turnovers early, jump out to that lead, and then grind you in the second half and win the game. That's what they did. They covered. New England had a shot to cover, just missed it. Oh, well. All right, new coaches we talked about. Now, I blew it last week because I only mentioned 3 of them. There's 5 new coaches. Didn't matter. 0-5. They're back to doing what they normally do. You can see there, normally about 43 to 44% winners in week 1. From 2018 to 21, they were god-awful. Last year, they were 7-3, but last year, again, we had 6 of them going into teams that had playoff expectations, and we had 5 experienced coaches coming to the league. This year, you can see the 5 who lost. Sean Payton, of course, a Super Bowl winner, but the others, you know, they're on 4 of the worst teams in the league, so it's kind of what you would have expected. New quarterbacks, day 1. This year, they go 4-4. Actually, they go 5-4. I put Rodgers as incomplete because he only played 4 plays. You can see, once again, the rookies, 0-3. Rookies struggle that first game. So, all right, new day 1 quarterbacks. You can see there are the 3 rookies that lost, and then Josh Dobbs. Okay, this is something we talked about week 2. It's called away losers, all right? This trend, we latched upon it a few years back, but it's kind of goofy. Here, I'll show you why in a minute. All right, so away teams, this week they're away. After they lost in week 1, they only win like 28% of the games. So you can see down below at the bottom, in 2020, they went 1-7, and that's when I started looking at this trend and discovered it, and I'm like, wow, week 2, away losers, they don't win very often. That's great news for Survivor players to have that kind of information. And then, of course, the last 2 years after I gave you the trend, they went 7-8. So I got to warn you, it's one of those things where data gives you a very pretty picture of the past, but it doesn't necessarily predict the future, okay? This year we have 7 teams. You can see them there. 4 of them are favorites, though. So based on the stat, 2 should win, but we have 4 favorites in the mix. So will it be like the last 2 years, closer to a 7-8 mark, or will it go back to what it's been, where they only win about 28% of games? All right, home winners. This is another one. So week 1 they win. Now they're at home in week 2. They win almost 80% of the time, historically. Once again, look down there. In 2020, 7-1. Last 2 years, 7-8, below 50%. The minute I give you the data and the trend, it goes the other way. This year we have 7 teams again. So based on the stat, 5 or 6 should win. Which way will it fall? You can see we have a couple of dogs mixed in there. The double down, I used to call this the double dog, do you? Because what you have is a home team off a win. They normally win 80% of the time. Playing against an away team off a loss. They normally lose 72% of the time. So you can see down below there in 2020, this group was 3-0. And of course, the last 2 years they've gone 4-5. This year we have 4 of these situations. 3 are favorites, pretty heavy favorites. 1, Jacksonville, is a dog to defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City. So if they go 3-1, it kind of fits the trend. But we'll see what happens there, right? Okay. Now, here's another one that's been hitting, though, the last 2 years. Home favorites in week 2 off of a loss. This is straight up now. Home favorites, week 2, off a loss, 8-1 the last 2 years. That's pretty good. Those are the kind of teams we like for Survivor. See, we have 3 this year. Buffalo, Cincy, Denver. Obviously, Buffalo, a heavy favorite. Let's take a look at our 5 worst teams right now. This is based on Vegas Super Bowl odds, okay? So this is a more of an objective look, not just a Cheezeman perception look, although pretty much reflects how I feel. You can see there the worst team, number 1 right now, Arizona. 2 is Houston, 3 Indy, 4 Carolina, 5 Chicago. Tennessee falls out of the group. Chicago moves in. So these are our 5 keys for Survivor. You want to play against the weak, not worry about playing the best team. Let's take a look at the dog report. Why do we do this? 33% of dogs win straight up typically every week, which means for your confidence pools, 5 or 6 teams on a 16-game slate that are dogs should win. Now, of course, some of those could be 1-point dogs, right? And as I go through and pick out the ones that I think have the best chance, that's our first one. Atlanta is a 1.5-point dog at home to Green Bay. Both have top 10 offensive lines. Both have defenses that could move up this year. They've both invested heavily in their defenses. Their potential to be top 10 defenses. We'll see how that works out. Atlanta did exactly what they're supposed to do, took care of business at home and romped. Green Bay did look impressive beating Chicago, but I want you to realize, there's always overreaction in week 2. But they beat Chicago, who had one of the 5 worst defenses in the NFL last year. So do not get crazy carried away going, Jordan Love's the next Aaron Rodgers. I think he's going to be fine. He's going to be a good quarterback. He's not Aaron Rodgers, okay? I thought the game would be a pick, or Atlanta might be a 1-point favorite. I think Atlanta might be able to beat them. Houston and Indy. Indy's a 1-point favorite. Both these teams are terrible. They're both kind of in a similar situation. They have new coaches, new quarterbacks. But let me tell you something. Houston's defense played pretty well against Baltimore last week. Last year, they had the worst rush defense in the league, but their secondary and the linebackers were pretty good, and they're starting to build on that. DeMeco Ryans a defensive guru. I think Houston's defense is going to turn a corner this year and get a lot better. Jonathan Taylor's still not playing, so I give Houston a shot there. It's only a 1-point game anyway. The other one that I really look at is Jacksonville and Kansas City. I do believe Chris Jones is back for Kansas City on defense. That's a huge help. And I think Kelsey is going to play. That is a huge help. But I will say this. Jacksonville's offense is running on all cylinders. And now they're at home. You got Ridley and the gang ready to roll. They put up 30 points last week. I see no reason why they can't put up 27 or 30 this week. They're going to have to get outscored. And I'm not sure KC is ready to start flinging up 40. We'll see. I kind of like New England. They played a lot better than I thought they would against a great Philly football team. Miami was outstanding on offense, but you're going against a Brandon Staley defense, which is always pretty shaky and seems to be worse than it should be every year. Now you're going up against a New England defense. It's pretty good. I mean, they spotted Philly a big lead with those turnovers, but played really well the rest of the game. It'll be an interesting game there. Road dogs, I like, Baltimore, once again, not because I don't like Cincinnati. I love Cincinnati. By week 10, I think Cincinnati will be one of the best teams in the league again. But Joe Burrow hasn't really gotten a chance to play all preseason. I think it's a struggle for him right now. Last year, it took him 3-4 games to get going. In week 2, they actually went to Dallas as a 7-point favorite after that week 1 debacle when Burrow was horrible, right? Because he didn't play all preseason. And they lost to Cooper Rush. Dak Prescott was hurt. Cooper Rush was playing his first game, and they lost. So it took Burrow a couple games to really get it going and get into it. It's not going to shock me if that's the same thing that happens this year. And Baltimore is a good football team. So it's not going to surprise me one bit if Baltimore goes in and beats them. And I'm not going to scream, oh my God, Sky is falling in Cincinnati because it won't be the case. They did the same thing last year. Denver, Washington. I expect Denver and Sean Payton to get it right and win this week, but you got to prove it on the field. Last year, we saw Denver was a train wreck, and then last week they get beat first game, although we did tell you Vegas is just as good as Denver, and we said the same thing. We need to see it before we believe it, and Vegas beats them. So those are a couple of dogs that we kind of like or could see the potential of winning this week. We're doing things a little different. Here's a schedule for week 2 in play. Remember what I talked about? First of all, the first 4 weeks in Survivor, just put your head down and advance. Get through. They're always the toughest weeks until we really understand how good or bad teams are, right? So those optimization plays, the saving teams, the look-aheads, none of that ever works in my opinion. But go ahead if you want to try it and do it, you can. But what we always talk about is you have 18 weeks, there's 14 playoff teams. If you assume you're going to play the 14 playoff teams one time, you got to play 4 non-playoff teams. That's where your strategery comes in. You're looking to maximize or minimize your risk from when you have to play one of those teams, okay? So here we go. Here's your in-play playoff teams. Okay, number 1, clearly Buffalo. Buffalo should bounce back. The Jets' defense is far superior to Las Vegas's. Buffalo turned the ball over a zillion times last week. I anticipate Buffalo bounces back this week, throws up 30, and bombs Las Vegas. Vegas is pretty good. And, oh, by the way, what do we say? Vegas is the number 1 team in terms of upsetting teams as 6-point dogs or higher. So be alerted on that. Be careful. But I do anticipate Buffalo getting back and rolling this game. Number 2, Philadelphia. Man, they picked up where they left off. Looked great last week in what I thought might have been a tough spot. But they handled it pretty well. Now you get Minnesota. I will say this. Minnesota tends to win games they're not supposed to. They lose games they're not supposed to, like week 1. But they also win games they're not supposed to. Philly at home, though. I think Philly's going to handle their business and roll. Number 3, San Francisco. Now the Rams looked pretty good. Right? Last year, they lost Cooper Kupp. They lost Matthew Stafford. And they were awful. This year, Stafford's back. Kupp is out. But you can see with the Tutu Atwell and, Puka Nuka. I apologize for messing up his name, but he was pretty good. They both had over 100 yards receiving. And the Rams pretty much crushed Seattle. So they're probably better than we think as long as they stay healthy. But on the other hand, San Francisco looked phenomenal. Brock Purdy, when he's healthy, that team is definitely a potential Super Bowl team. Right now, it looks like Philly and San Francisco in the NFC will return to that championship game right now. And I expect Purdy to go in. He's undefeated in the regular season as a starter. I think it will continue. But I will say this. I'd rather use San Francisco in a later time. It's still kind of a risky play on the road against a Ram team. We can get them later in a better value. Detroit's number 4. Now, the last time Seattle and Detroit played, 93 points. 93. Count them. It's like a zillion. 93 points. The OU in this game is only 47. I don't understand why. I guess I do. Number 1, Detroit held Kansas City to 20. But that's a Kansas City team with no receivers. I don't care what you say. Without Hill, they went a little backwards. They got Schuster and Kelsey still. Last year, win a Super Bowl. Now Schuster's gone. Kelsey gets hurt. So last week they had no receivers. I'm sorry. Those guys are good, but there's no great receiver there. And we saw Kadarius Toney, probably the one who could be great, drop 3 balls. So, Detroit's defense did okay, but they're still not going to be great. Seattle should score some points here. Seattle was god-awful last week. I expect them to play a lot better this week. And Detroit's offense should be just fine. I don't know that they're going to score 93 again, but I can certainly see them scoring 60 or 70. I like the over in this game. I think Detroit wins this one at home, though. They're pretty good. Dallas at home. I mean, you got Zach Wilson coming in instead of Aaron Rodgers. Bummer. What a bummer for the Jets. I can't believe it. But Zach Wilson's going to be better than he was last year, okay? The question is he good enough yet? Is he good enough to take you to the playoffs or where you want to go? I don't think he's good enough to get you to a Super Bowl. I do think he can be good enough to get you to the playoffs. Clearly, you're better on your 10th game than your first game. Now he's had a preseason with Aaron Rodgers where he learned a lot of nuance and tricks. He should be much better than last year, but that still doesn't necessarily make you great or good enough to be what you need him to be. That said, Dallas's defense looked phenomenal last week and probably should do pretty well this week and handle their business. Here's the key ones, right? in-play teams that are non-playoff options, and this is where I'm looking this week, particularly in my pool where you can rebuy. So there's really no risk. Giants number 1. They were awful last week. Now, last week we told you last year the Giants were played better than they actually were. They had a soft schedule. This year they have a tougher schedule. We said last week Dallas has more talent, is a better team than the Giants, and they took care of business in a big way. But once again, you're never as bad as your worst game. That will easily go down as the Giants' worst game this year. I expect them to bounce back in a big way. Danny Jones will play much better. He's going to run the ball more. Arizona's defense is lousy. Giants are going to have their way with them and win this game. I'm taking them in Survivor. Number 2, Denver. I don't necessarily believe in Sean Payton just yet. I need to see it on the field. Obviously, we know his history is fantastic, but Russell Wilson was so bad last year. Is it fixable? We need to see it. I will say this. I think Las Vegas has a better team than Washington. Washington comes in off a game where I thought they would play better than they did. They weren't as good as I thought. I kind of like Denver to just take care of business here. And number 3, Tampa Bay. Chicago played terribly on offense last week, and Tampa Bay's defense was surprisingly really good. When you go into Minnesota, and that's an offense in Minnesota that averaged 27 a game at home last year, and you go in there and shut them down like they did, that's impressive. They probably will keep the Bears scoring down and take care of business and could be a great option for Survivor again as well. And I don't view them as a playoff team either. Now, the maybes, we keep these on our list because when we get to week 10, 12, 16, and you start to run out of options, you may need to grab a maybe. This week, New Orleans and the Chargers, they're both on the road. Carolina is still young, probably struggles a few more weeks before they get it going at all. The Chargers are just like Minnesota, I told you about. They tend to lose games they should win and win games they should lose. This could be one they go on the road and land blast Tennessee. We'll see. But Tennessee was not as bad as what the public and the experts were saying they'd be. I don't think they're going to be as awful as people think, but the Chargers offense should score plenty of points and win that game. The ones that are risky are these 6. I wouldn't touch these for Survivor. No chance, no way. We can get teams in better spots later on. However, you see the 2 games in blue. So we have Revival, a rebuy strategy after week 2. Then it all ends. So if you play Revive strategy, it makes sense if you don't think those teams are going to make the playoffs to use them. I don't think Green Bay will make the playoffs. I think Detroit's going to win that division, maybe Minnesota. I don't think Atlanta's going to win that division. They could, but I think New Orleans is probably going to win it. I definitely don't think Indy or Houston are winning their division. I think Jacksonville will. So one of my plays for sure will be Indy or Houston. If they win, I've used a non-playoff team I'll never use again. If they lose, I just rebuy, and I've used a non-playoff team. Good deal. Same for Green Bay, Atlanta. I may use one of those teams as well. So that's your rebuy, revive strategy. Take advantage of it here if you have it in your pool, especially a big pool. So here are the Survivor picks I'm thinking of in my primary pool for the 6 teams. You can see Team 5, which had Minnesota. I revived it, so it is in play. You can see there what I'm looking at. Certainly looking at a couple of the big favorites. I like Philly and Buffalo. Definitely going the Giants. I think they're going to roll this week. I'm going to go Denver over I took Tampa Bay as well. And right now I've got Houston. I think Houston can beat Indianapolis. I may flip one of these teams for Atlanta or Green Bay. I don't think Tampa Bay is going to make the playoffs either. They have a shot. Right now, I feel like New Orleans is the team to beat there. We'll see. After week 4 or 5, I may look back and go, wow, Tampa Bay is going to win that division, or Atlanta. But right now, my gut says New Orleans. You got to make your own gut feeling on that, okay? Our top 5 plays for week 2 last week. We did pretty good. We did pretty good for you. So let's see what we think this week. This week, Seattle, Detroit, I'm going over all the way. It's at 47. They hit 93 last year. I don't see any changes. I think Seattle's offense will wake up this week, certainly put up 20-some points. In fact, you'll see down there under the bonus, I have the Seattle team total over 20.5. Actually, I might move that up into the top 5 plays. To me, that looks like a no-brainer. Take that Detroit thing out with Kansas City last week. Kansas City had no receivers. They dropped too many balls. Seattle, that's not going to happen to Seattle this week against Detroit's defense. I think they score a lot of points. I think Detroit's going to score a lot of points. I mean, the Rams put up a bunch against, and I think Detroit's offense is better than the Rams' offense. So I like the over there. The Giants, minus 5.5 on the road, but I love it. And I love Danny Jones rushing over 35 and a half yards there. He averages around 41 a game. And I think he's going to run the ball a lot. I think their offense will get on track. A 0, that was a debacle. This week they're going to put up some points, win that game and cover, and Danny Jones is going to rush for over that total. Jacksonville team total over. I love this, 23.5. I'm not necessarily sold on Kansas City's defense just yet. I think Jacksonville will be just fine. They've been averaging 27, 28 points a game the last 6 or 7 they played. I think it continues. So they may not win the game, but I feel Jacksonville will absolutely score. And I like Jacksonville plus the 3. Now, I may move that Seattle team total up there instead of this one. We'll see how I feel as we learn more about Travis Kelce's status. Down in the bonus, last year we played the Philly first quarter, Philly first half a lot last year. And probably going to do it a lot this year because they were the number 1 team against the spread last year and did extremely well. They're the number 1 scoring team in the first half, number 1 scoring team in the second quarter. So those are things to think about. If they continue that early in the year, that may continue throughout the year, and that could be a pattern we want to jump on. Just to be aware. I like both the Seattle and Detroit team total overs. Man, I'm really selling out in this game. Now watch, it's going to be 21-20, just like last week. And none of it will hit. And then the last one there, the Jets plus 9.5. I just feel like that's a lot. Their defense is so good. Okay? The Giants defense is not close to the Jets defense, all right? So don't compare that at all. Just because Dallas threw up 40 last week, Dallas's defense did as much as caused as much of the scoring as their offense did. So Dak and that team is going to have a much, much greater struggle against this Jets defense this week. And I feel like Zach Wilson, I know Dallas's defense was phenomenal last week too. This could be a very low scoring game. Could be something like field goals, 19-13, 19-12, even 19-10 works if you get 9.5. All right. Those are my picks, and one of the things you can note there, I'm now putting up playoff and non-playoff teams. If you think about it logically, through 18 weeks, that means every 4.5 weeks you should have used a non-playoff team if you do it linearly, right? But what I try to do is get those non-playoff teams out of the way in the first 10, 12 weeks. I just want to make sure I minimize the risk. I feel like that's a huge option this week. You've got to do it in a revival pool. Take advantage and do it. All right, guys. Glad you were here. Thank you for GooberGroove.com for sponsoring us. Take a look at their drumsticks, baseball hats, golf grips. This has been week number 2, picking winners of the Cheezeman and the Ball Survivor. Good luck, and we hope you survive.